When the Council realized humans call exterminating entire species pest control. First contact and Council introduction. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the known universe shifted uncomfortably in their variously shaped seats. Today marked the first official introduction of Earth's delegation to the Council, and nobody quite knew what to expect from these humans. Ibns. Order. Order in the chamber. Boomed Council chairperson Clex Thara, her tentacles waving frantically for silence. The seven-limbed Psurlian's skin pulsed with waves of blue stress patterns as she tried to maintain decorum. We will now welcome the Earth delegation to present their credentials. The massive double doors at the end of the chamber swung open with a theatrical hiss. 3 humans entered, walking with a confident stride that immediately set several prey-evolved species on edge. "Greetings, honored representatives of the Galactic Council," said the lead human, a broad-shouldered individual with a disarming smile. "I am Ambassador Marcus Alvarez of Earth, and with me are cultural liaison Tara Jackson and scientific advisor Dr. Elijah Okafor." Clex Thara nodded her eye stalks in acknowledgement. "Welcome, Earth delegation. Your species' rapid technological advancement since we detected your radio signals has been remarkable." "Thank you," Ambassador Alvarez replied. "We're eager to learn and contribute to this esteemed body." From the back of the chamber came a guttural sound. Grex Kor, the Varnaxian delegate, had half risen from his acid pool. "Chairperson, I must object. These creatures achieved faster than light travel barely 50 cycles after discovering nuclear fission. Such rapid progress is unnatural and concerning." Dr. Okafor stepped forward. "With respect, Delegate Grex Kor, humans have always been adaptable. We call it standing on the shoulders of giants. Each generation builds upon the knowledge of the last." "Fascinating," chirped Zrill 8, the hive mind representative of the entomorphs. "Your species evolves knowledge collectively rather than biologically. Most unusual." Cultural liaison Jackson smiled. "We consider it one of our strengths. Humans are quite collaborative when we need to be." "When you need to be?" asked Mealix, the fox-like Vulparan delegate. "And what of when you don't need to be?" The humans exchanged glances. "Well," said Jackson, "we can be somewhat competitive." This triggered a wave of nervous chittering throughout the chamber. Competition was a concept many council species had evolved beyond eons ago. "Perhaps," Ambassador Alvarez interjected smoothly, "we should move on to the cultural exchange portion of our introduction. We've prepared a presentation on human history and customs." What followed was a carefully curated showcase of human achievement, art, music, scientific discoveries, and humanitarian efforts. The council representatives watched with a mixture of fascination and concern as the humans enthusiastically displayed their species' accomplishments. "Your species has adapted to inhabit nearly every environment on your homeworld," observed the NLA, the gaseous nebulite delegate, "even the most inhospitable regions. Adaptability is our specialty," Dr. Okafor explained. "Whether it's the freezing poles or scorching deserts, humans find a way to not just survive but thrive." "And you keep animals as companions?" asked Drix Pondibulator, the insectoid X-Relix representative, mandibles clicking in confusion. "Not as food sources or labor?" "Yes, we call them pets," Jackson explained. "They're part of our families." "You form familial bonds with other species?" several delegates asked simultaneously. "Of course," Jackson replied. "Humans can form emotional attachments to nearly anything. We name our vehicles, talk to our plants, and feel sad when cleaning robots get stuck in corners." A baffled silence fell over the chamber. "Well," Chairperson Clex Thara finally said, her skin now cycling through a kaleidoscope of confused color patterns, "the Earth delegation has certainly given us much to consider. We will recess for 20 time units to process this information." As the council members filed out, hushed conversations erupted among the representatives. "Did you see their teeth? Omnivorous predators. They survived multiple near-extinction events on their homeworld. I heard they can regenerate limbs, or was it organs? Ambassador Alvarez leaned toward his colleagues. I think that went rather well, don't you? Dr. Okafor sighed. They're terrified of us, Marcus. Yes, but they're also intrigued, Jackson pointed out. That's a starting point. Indeed, Alvarez nodded. Besides, we've only shared the nice parts so far. Wait until they learn about our competitive sports, our military history, or our pest control methods. The three humans shared a laugh, unaware of just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The Cultural Exchange Conference was in full swing 3 days later. Various species had set up booths showcasing their homeworld's traditions, arts, and daily life. The human delegation had created an impressive display of Earth's diverse cultures, complete with holographic projections of landmarks, food samples, and historical artifacts. Ambassador Alvarez was deep in conversation with the Mealix delegate when a commotion erupted near the Earth booth. Everything all right over there? Alvarez muttered to Dr. Okafor through his communicator. Slight situation, Okafor replied. Jackson apparently mentioned something about her apartment back on Earth. Alvarez excused himself and hurried over to find Cultural Liaison Jackson surrounded by a group of increasingly agitated aliens. Chairperson Klexthara's skin was flashing alarming patterns of red and black. What exactly do you mean by exterminator? Klexthara demanded, her voice modulator barely containing her distress. Jackson looked bewildered. It's just pest control. I had a rodent problem in my apartment building, so I called a service to take care of it. Standard procedure. You called a professional killer to eliminate an entire species from your dwelling, gasped Zrelate, the segments of their body quivering in horror. What? No, not the entire species, Jackson protested, just the ones in my apartment. They were mice, not some endangered species. But you deliberately sought their elimination. Pressed Greg's core, acid bubbling around his thorax in agitation. Dr. Okafor stepped in. I believe there's a misunderstanding. Humans don't typically eliminate entire species. Except when we do, Jackson interjected casually, like with smallpox. That was a deliberate extinction, but it was a virus that killed millions of humans. The silence that fell over the gathering was deafening. Several delegates took physical steps backward from the human booth. You've deliberately caused extinctions. Thienlei's gaseous form condensed in shock. Ambassador Alvarez recognized the diplomatic disaster unfolding and quickly intervened. Perhaps we should clarify the context. Clarify? Boomed Greg's core. Your species has programs dedicated to the extermination of other lifeforms. You even have a name for it, pest control. It's not what you think, Jackson tried to explain. It's about managing populations that can spread disease or damage infrastructure. We don't just kill. You have industries built around this practice, interrupted Drix Pondibulator, his compound eyes widening in alarm. Specialized tools, chemicals, and professionals dedicated to extinction events. Alvarez raised his hands placatingly. Bente, respected delegates, there's important context missing here. The species we control are typically invasive or... Invasive? Shrieked Klexthara. You judge which species have the right to exist in certain spaces. Dr. Okafor attempted a scientific approach. All ecosystems have natural balances. Sometimes human activity disrupts these balances, and intervention becomes necessary to commit genocide. Greg's core's acid pool was now bubbling furiously. You play gods, deciding which species live or die. That's not Jackson started, but was cut off by Chairperson Klexthara's amplified voice. This conference is suspended immediately. Security, escort the human delegation to their quarters. The Council will convene for an emergency session in 1 hour to discuss this revelation. As security drones surrounded them, Ambassador Alvarez leaned toward his colleagues. Well, that escalated quickly. I was just talking about my mouse problem, Jackson whispered. Horrified, I didn't think it would cause an interstellar incident. Dr. Okafor sighed heavily. I believe we've just discovered the galaxy's first true universal cultural taboo. Killing mice? Jackson asked incredulously. No, Alvarez replied grimly. Species extinction as pest management. Something tells me our integration into galactic society just got a lot more complicated. As they were escorted away, the human delegation couldn't help but notice the looks of fear and disgust from the other delegates. Their casual mention of pest control had somehow transformed them from quirky newcomers to potential monsters in the eyes of the Galactic Council. This is utterly ridiculous, Ambassador Alvarez muttered as he paced the diplomatic quarters assigned to the Earth delegation. We're being treated like criminals over pest control. Dr. Okafor was hunched over a datapad, scrolling through Council biological protocols. According to these records, most Council species evolved in environments with remarkably low competition. Their planets had abundant resources and few predators, so they never had to deal with rats in their grain supplies or mosquitoes carrying malaria. Jackson asked, sprawled on a conforming chair that was struggling to adapt to human posture. Precisely, Okafor nodded. Their ecological history is fundamentally different from Earth's. Our planet's biodiversity, while beautiful, created intense evolutionary pressure. A chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Thara, flanked by 2 security drones and a small floating orb that appeared to be recording the interaction. Earth delegation. The chairperson's voice was formal, her skin now a controlled professional purple. The Council has decided to dispatch an investigative team to your planet to observe these pest control practices firsthand. Alvarez stepped forward. Chairperson, this seems excessive. We can provide documentation. Documentation created by humans. Thara interrupted. The Council requires impartial observation. 3 representatives will accompany your Dr. Okafor back to Earth. You and Liaison Jackson will remain here to answer further questions. Dr. Okafor straightened. Who will be joining me? Scientist Zrill 8 of the Entomorphs, biologist Mielix of the Volparans, and myself, Thara announced. We depart in 6 hours. After the chairperson left, Alvarez collapsed into a chair. This is a diplomatic nightmare. Elijah, you'll need to manage the situation. How exactly am I supposed to do that? Dr. Okafor asked. Not show them exterminators, pretend we don't have mousetraps. No, Alvarez said after a moment's thought. Show them everything. But provide context. Make them understand why we do what we do. The human vessel Curiosity made the journey to Earth in record time. During the trip, Dr. Okafor attempted to prepare the alien delegates for what they would encounter. Earth's ecosystem is incredibly complex, he explained as they gathered in the ship's conference room. We have millions of species all competing for resources. Competition, Mielix's nose wrinkled in distaste, such a primitive concept. Yet necessary for our planetary development, Okafor countered. This competition drove evolution, including our own. Zrill 8 segments realigned thoughtfully. Your species emerged from predatory behavior? We were omnivores, but yes, hunting was crucial to our development. Okafor explained. It shaped our tool use, our social structures, even our cognitive abilities. Disturbing, Thara commented, her skin rippling with concerned greens and blues. And you maintain these hunting behaviors. Some humans still hunt, yes, but most get food from agricultural systems, Okafor clarified. However, we do still need to manage species that threaten those systems. Management, Mielix's ears flattened, your euphemism for extermination. Dr. Okafor sighed. This was going to be a challenging mission. Their first stop on Earth was a suburban neighborhood outside Chicago. Dr. Okafor had arranged for them to observe a typical pest control service call. This is Pete Gonzalez, a local exterminator. Okafor introduced a cheerful man in a uniform bearing the logo Nature's Balance Pest Solutions. Exterminators, Thara whispered, her skin briefly flashing with alarm patterns before she controlled it. Hey folks. Unusual crew today, Pete nodded at the aliens, remarkably unfazed. Got a standard rodent situation here. A homeowner's been hearing scratching in the walls. As Pete unloaded his equipment, Zrill 8 moved closer, fascinated despite their horror. "What are those devices?" "Humane traps," Pete explained. "Catch and release. For suburban calls like this, we try non-lethal methods first." "You don't kill these creatures?" Mealix asked, ears perking up slightly. "Not if we don't have to," Pete shrugged. "Company policy is to start with exclusion and relocation. Find how they're getting in, seal it up, and move any existing rodents to appropriate habitats away from humans." The aliens exchanged surprised glances. This wasn't the ruthless extermination they had expected. "Of course," Pete continued casually, "for serious infestations, especially in food storage facilities or restaurants, we do have to use more permanent solutions." And just like that, the brief moment of alien relief evaporated. The next day found the investigation team at a large agricultural facility in the Midwest. Vast fields of corn and soybeans stretched to the horizon, interrupted only by the occasional drone sprayer passing overhead. "Your food production is impressively efficient," Mealix admitted, watching a harvesting machine process a row of crops in seconds. "Thank you," Dr. Okafor replied, "though it's taken centuries of development to reach this point." "And how do you handle competitors in these settings?" Tara asked, her tentacles twitching nervously. The facility manager, a weathered woman named Patricia Mills, gestured toward the fields. "Multiple approaches. There's biological controls, introducing natural predators like ladybugs to control aphids. We use crop rotation to disrupt pest life cycles. And yes, sometimes targeted pesticides. Pesticides." Drill 8 segments trembled. "Poisons designed to eliminate specific taxonomic groups." "Well, yes," Patricia nodded. "But we're much more precise than we used to be. Early pesticides were pretty indiscriminate. Killed everything. Good bugs, bad bugs, birds, small mammals. Terrible for the ecosystem." "You poisoned entire ecological zones?" Thara's skin flashed with horror patterns. "Back in the 20th century. Yeah," Patricia said casually. "DDT was sprayed everywhere. Turns out that was a bad idea. We're smarter now." "Smarter about mass extinction," Mealix muttered. Dr. Okafor interjected. "We learned from our mistakes. Modern pest management is about balance, not eradication. Yet you maintain museums dedicated to your extermination technologies," Zrill 8 noted, referring to the agricultural history exhibit they'd toured earlier. "That's different," Dr. Okafor struggled. "It's acknowledging our past, not celebrating it." Their next stop was a municipal mosquito control program in Florida. The alien delegates watched in stunned silence as trucks drove through neighborhoods, releasing clouds of insecticide into the evening air. "This is genocide," Thara whispered, her skin cycling through distress patterns. "It's disease control," corrected the program director, Dr. Natalie Chen. "Mosquitoes here carry dengue, Zika, West Nile virus, diseases that can kill humans. So you eliminate another species to protect your own?" Mealix asked, ears flattened against his head. "We don't eliminate them entirely," Dr. Chen explained. "That would cause ecological problems. We manage their populations to reduce disease transmission." "Manage," Zrill 8 repeated. "You keep using these euphemisms." Dr. Okafor stepped in. "Perhaps we should explain the concept of carrying capacity and ecological balance." "Balance?" Thara's tentacles curled in agitation. "There is nothing balanced about selectively destroying populations." "Actually," Dr. Chen interjected, "many of these mosquito species aren't native to this region. They were accidentally introduced and have no natural predators here. Without control measures, they'd overwhelm the ecosystem." The aliens fell silent, processing this new information. "You're saying," Mealix began slowly, "that these species are out of place?" "Exactly." Dr. Okafor nodded eagerly. "Invasive species disrupt established ecosystems. Sometimes management is necessary to preserve greater biodiversity." Zrill 8 segments realigned thoughtfully. "Your world is extraordinarily complex." "And competitive," Dr. Okafor added. "Remember, Earth's evolutionary history shaped humans into problem solvers. When faced with species that threaten our survival, whether through disease, crop destruction, or structural damage, we develop solutions. Extermination solutions, Tara said, but her tone had shifted from accusatory to contemplative. Sometimes Dr. Okafor acknowledged, but increasingly we seek balance. We've learned that complete eradication often has unintended consequences. As they boarded their transport to the next location, Dr. Okafor noticed the aliens conferring quietly among themselves. For the first time since this diplomatic disaster began, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps they were starting to understand. That hope was promptly crushed at their next stop, a warehouse-sized facility with a massive sign reading "Bugbuster Exterminators, we kill what bugs you." "Oh no," Dr. Okafor muttered as the alien delegates froze in horror. "Welcome to Bugbusters," boomed a cheerful voice as a man in a uniform adorned with cartoonish dead insects approached them. "You folks here for the tour? We've got quite the display of elimination technologies. Wait till you see our new molecular disruptors. They can wipe out every roach in a 5-story building in under an hour." Dr. Okafor closed his eyes and silently cursed whoever had approved this particular stop on their itinerary. The hearing. The Grand Council chamber had been reconfigured into a tribunal setting. Ambassador Alvarez and Cultural Liaison Jackson sat at a small table facing the semicircular arrangement of council delegates. The atmosphere was tense, with murmurs rippling through the assembled aliens as Dr. Okafor entered with the investigation team. "This emergency session of the Galactic Council will now commence," announced Vice Chairperson the NLA, their gaseous form condensed into formal density patterns. Chairperson Tara will present the findings of the Earth investigation. Tara floated to the central podium, her skin cycling through official blues and purples. "Honored delegates, what we witnessed on Earth was complex." Holoprojections appeared around the chamber, showing images from their investigation: the humane traps, the agricultural drones, the mosquito-controlled trucks, and finally, the Bugbuster Exterminator facility. "Humans have developed systematic approaches to elimination of what they term pest species," Tara continued. "Their methods range from relocation to complete eradication." Gasps echoed through the chamber. "The scale of their operations is concerning," added Mielix, stepping forward. "They maintain entire industries dedicated to this practice. And yet," Drill 8 interjected, their segments realigning thoughtfully, "there are nuances we must consider." Ambassador Alvarez leaned toward Jackson. "That sounds promising." "Don't get too excited," she whispered back. They still looked ready to vomit when they saw the rat poison aisle at the hardware store. Greg's core bubbled up from his acid pool. "Nuances? They destroy entire populations without remorse. How can such behavior be justified?" Dr. Okafor stepped forward. "With respect, Delegate Greg's core, Earth's ecosystem is unique among Council worlds. Our biodiversity evolved through competitive pressure. Predator-prey relationships shaped our planet's evolution, including our own." "You speak of competition as if it excuses genocide." Drix Pondibulator clicked his mandibles in disgust. "It's not genocide," Jackson protested. "Genocide implies intent to destroy an entire species. Most pest control is localized management." "Management," scoffed Greg's core. "Your favorite euphemism." Ambassador Alvarez stood. "Honored delegates, I believe we're facing a fundamental cultural misunderstanding. Earth's evolutionary history is characterized by competition for resources. Species that couldn't adapt went extinct naturally. This has happened millions of times over billions of years. So you merely accelerate natural processes?" asked Thien skeptically. "In some cases, yes," Dr. Okafor answered, "but more importantly, we maintain balance. When invasive species threaten established ecosystems, intervention becomes necessary." "You play gods," Greg's core accused, "deciding which species deserve to live." "No more than nature itself decides," Alvarez countered. "The difference is that we try to make informed decisions based on scientific understanding." Tara's skin rippled with contemplative patterns. During our investigation, we observed that humans have indeed evolved more nuanced approaches in recent decades. Yes, Zrill 8 added. They increasingly favor targeted interventions over broad elimination. But they still maintain extinction as an option, Grex Core insisted. The facility we visited, Bugbuster, boasted of their killing efficiency. We also have conservation programs, Jackson pointed out. Humans have spent billions protecting endangered species, restoring habitats, and preserving biodiversity. You protect some species while annihilating others, Drix Pondibulator observed. By what criteria do you make these judgments? Dr. Okafor stepped forward again. Ecological role, biodiversity impact, threat to human health, or food security. These decisions aren't made lightly. Yet you created specialized poisons for different taxonomic groups, Mielix noted. Rodenticides, insecticides, herbicides, an entire vocabulary of death. Ambassador Alvarez spread his hands. We evolved on a competitive planet. Our survival often depended on controlling species that threatened our food supplies or spread disease. These weren't choices made for sport, they were necessary adaptations. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as the council delegates processed this information. Finally, Thienle spoke. It seems we have much to consider regarding the unique evolutionary path of humans. This tribunal will recess for deliberation. As the delegates filed out, Alvarez turned to his team. Well, that went better than expected. Did it? Jackson raised an eyebrow. They still look at us like we're monsters. Yes, Dr. Okafor nodded. But thoughtful monsters, they're beginning to understand, even if they don't approve. Understanding is the first step, Alvarez said. Now we just need to hope they don't decide to classify humans as a pest species that needs managing. With the resolution. 6 months later, Ambassador Alvarez stood on the observation deck of the Galactic Council station, watching the swirling nebula beyond the reinforced windows. The door slid open behind him, and Dr. Okafor entered, looking tired but satisfied. How's the Zebraxian situation? Alvarez asked. Contained. Okafor nodded. Our modified fungicide stopped the spread, and the biorestoration team has successfully reintroduced the native crops. The Zebraxians are implementing our suggested monitoring systems. Another successful pest control operation. Alvarez smiled. Sorry, ecological management intervention. The council is still getting used to the terminology, Okafor chuckled. But they're coming around. 5 more species have requested assistance with similar issues since the Zebraxian case. We've gone from pariahs to saviors in half a year, Alvarez mused. Who would have thought our talent for extermination would become our greatest diplomatic asset? The door slid open again, and Jackson entered, followed by Klexthara, whose skin displayed friendly greeting patterns. Ambassador. Dr. Okafor. Klexthara bobbed her eye stalks respectfully. The council session is about to begin. Your presence is requested for the formal establishment of the Galactic Ecological Management Authority. Gemma. Jackson grinned. Still can't believe we're institutionalizing pest control on a galactic scale. Necessary adaptation. Klexthara's skin rippled with acceptance patterns. As more species join the council and travel increases between worlds, invasive organism transfer becomes inevitable. Humanity's experience proves invaluable. As they walked toward the council chamber, Grex Core approached from an intersecting corridor. The Varnaxian delegate's acid pool was calm, indicating a neutral emotional state, a significant improvement from their previous interactions. Earth delegation, Grex Core acknowledged. The Varnaxian conclave has approved your proposal for the preventative monitoring system. An installation begins next cycle. Excellent, Dr. Okafor replied. Early detection is critical for effective management. Indeed, Grex Core bubbled. Though I must admit I never imagined advocating for human extermination methods in my lifetime. Ecological management, Jackson corrected with a straight face. Yes, your preferred euphemism. Grex Core's acid bubbled in what they had learned was the Varnaxian equivalent of dry humor. though I noticed your technical manuals still use terms like eradication and elimination. Professional terminology, Alvarez waved dismissively. The important thing is that we're all working together now. The council chamber was packed when they arrived. Representatives from dozens of species filled the seats, many of whom had initially recoiled at humanity's pest control practices. Now they nodded respectfully as the Earth delegation entered. Vice Chairperson Thian Lai called the session to order. Today marks the formal establishment of the Galactic Ecological Management Authority, a new division dedicated to addressing invasive organism threats throughout council space. Applause and various species-specific approval sounds filled the chamber. Leadership of this new authority will be shared between Dr. Elijah Okafor of Earth and biologist Mielix of Vulparan, Thianella continued. Their combined perspectives will ensure both effectiveness and ethical considerations in all interventions. As the ceremony proceeded, Jackson leaned toward Alvarez. 6 months ago, they were ready to classify us as potential threats to galactic harmony. Now they're putting us in charge of officially sanctioned extermination programs. The universe works in mysterious ways, Alvarez replied with a smile. Turns out, every adaptation has its purpose. Later at the reception, Klexthara approached the human delegation privately. Her skin displayed confidential communication patterns. There is something I must ask, she said. Voice lowered. During our investigation on Earth, we observed your species' remarkable ability to categorize threats and develop targeted solutions. Yes? Dr. Okafor prompted. The Council has recently detected potentially concerning behaviors from a non-member species in the Cygnus sector. Klexthara's skin rippled with worry patterns. They appear to be systematically consuming resources without regard for ecological impact. Traditional diplomatic approaches have failed. The humans exchanged glances. Are you asking us to? Jackson trailed off, uncertain. To conduct an ecological threat assessment, Klexthara finished carefully, and suggest appropriate management strategies. Ambassador Alvarez suppressed a smile. Of course, Chairperson. After all, that's what humans do best: identify problems and eliminate them. Manage them. Klexthara corrected, her skin displaying the pattern they now recognized as irony. As you've taught us, extinction is a last resort. Usually Alvarez nodded. But as we've also taught you, sometimes pest control is necessary for the greater good. As Klexthara moved away, Jackson turned to her colleagues. Well, it's official. We've gone from terrifying the galaxy with our pest control methods to being the galaxy's pest controllers. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization, Dr. Okafor nodded solemnly, then grinned. Extermination as a service. Ecological management, Alvarez corrected with a wink. Let's not frighten the neighbors again.